Welcome to Intermediate English with Gregg. And that's me. So, let's get started. Well, let's warm up with the weather.
Gregg, how's the weather today?
There was some frost this morning. There was some frost on my car this morning. Let's check the board. Of course, the question, how's the weather today? For today's expression, there was some frost this morning. Of course, our key word here is the word frost. Now, maybe you have heard this word. There was some frost. Frost, of course, means shimo in Japanese. There was some frost this morning. Now, in the opening of today's video, the first time I said, there was some frost this morning. The second time I said, there was some frost on my car this morning. That's, of course, an option. There was some frost if you want to say, there was some frost on the ground, there was some frost on my car. Of course, that is an option. Our main point, though, was there was some frost. Or, the frost might still be there. You could say there is some frost. So, let's practice today's phrase. I'll ask the question, and please use the word frost. Using the word on is your choice. Okay? So, how's the weather today? Great. Now, for today's lesson. Well, for today's lesson, we are going to continue to talk about experience. So, experience maybe part 2. In part 1, we talked about your experience using the pattern I've and I've never. And of course, the meaning, したことがある、したことがない。And today we're going to continue this same pattern. We're going to use it in a question now. So asking someone, したことがありますか? Now, of course, when you ask the question, have you ever, and of course we must use the PP, 過去分詞. Using the word ever, of course, is an option. I can use just the pattern have you plus PP. That is fine. Have you ever, of course, is like the feeling 今まで何々したことがありますか? So, but the word ever is an option. Now, of course, when you answer the question, please don't think deeply. If you want to just say yes or no, that's fine. If you want to use the standard form, yes I have, no I haven't, that's fine. If you want to just repeat this and yes I have been to somewhere, or no I have never been to, the answer, please don't think too deeply about it. Even just the simple yes, no is okay. So, today, of course, we talked about this word last week, been to. Maybe the most common question about experience is people use this, have you ever been to somewhere? Now, today we're just going to talk about 5 ideas, using been to plus 4 more, about if you met a foreigner, well, maybe you could use this question. After we discuss that, then I'm going to use these same words, and I'm going to ask you 5 questions. Now, the point, do you understand the question? There might be some new vocabulary. But first, maybe some simple questions you could ask a foreigner if you met them around Yamanaka. Like the idea of been to. Maybe you ask them, have you been to, for example, have you been to maybe you just ask them a simple question, have you been to a Japanese hot springs? Right? Right? That would be a question you could use. Another very common word is where people use the word seen. Of course, you have mitta koto arimasu ka? Right? So have you ever seen something? Now, you could use many, many questions. Right? But a question, for example, you could ask a foreigner maybe like, have you ever seen, for example, maybe just ask them, have you ever seen a Japanese kimono? Right? So talking about maybe Japanese culture, right? But seen, of course, right? Very common word. Have you ever seen Diamond Fuji? Right? There are many situations you could use this. Another very common word is when people use the word, okay, eaten. Right? Of course, food is a common topic of discussion. Right? So maybe you ask them, have you ever eaten something? And particularly maybe about Japanese food. And maybe it's just something very simple. You ask them, have you ever eaten natto? Right? Now, of course, some foreigners maybe have eaten it, and many foreigners maybe have never eaten natto. Well, that's a common question you could use. Have you ever eaten? Okay. Now, okay. Okay. Another good word to use is the idea, have you ever tried? Okay. The good point about tried is it can be used in many situations. I could use it with food. Have you ever tried natto? Okay. I can use it with activities. Have you ever tried skydiving? Okay. Okay. You can also ask about like different drinks. Okay. So maybe I ask, have you ever tried that matcha tea or the matcha green tea? Okay. Okay. So, of course, there is the word drink. Okay. But using PP of drink, sometimes a little difficult to remember and maybe a little difficult to pronounce because it's drink, drank, drunk. Okay? But if you use the word tried, you can use that talking about foods, drinks, or some activities. Okay? So tried is a very convenient word. For our fifth one, maybe use this idea, have you ever experienced? And of course, that's what we're talking about. So yeah, maybe, 何々経験したことありますか? Okay. Maybe a simple question you could ask a foreigner. Have you ever experienced for example, have you ever experienced a Japanese festival? Okay. So, right? Using these words, been to, seen, eaten, tried, and experienced, right, you can use in maybe a lot of situations. Right? Now, there are many, many more questions you could use. But, to finish today, I'm going to ask you 5 questions using these words. Okay? Now, I'll ask you the question. Okay? If you understand the question, of course, please answer it. But there might be 1 or 2 questions that you're not sure about the meaning. Okay? So, okay, let's try 5 questions. So, okay, for our first question, okay. Have you ever been to a bean throwing event? Have you ever been to a bean throwing event? Question number 2. Have you ever seen a bear in Yamanakako? Have you ever seen a bear in Yamanakako? Let's see. Eaten. Have you ever eaten a locust? Have you ever eaten a locust? Tried. Right? Have you ever tried the TOEIC test? Have you ever tried the TOEIC test? Last question. Have you ever experienced a powerful earthquake? Have you ever experienced a powerful earthquake? Did you understand all 5 questions? The questions I used, right? Have you ever been to, I asked, have you ever been to a bean throwing event? Right? Which of course is talking about the idea of that setsubun, that mamemaki, right? So a bean throwing event. I think the second question was quite simple because I asked, have you ever seen a bear in Yamanakako? Right? Have you ever seen a bear in Yamanakako? Right? Now, I hope not. Right? Right? Eaten. Now, this one was maybe a new question. I asked, have you ever eaten a locust? Right? And that one might be a new question. The idea of a locust would be in Japanese the inago. Right? Have you ever eaten a locust? Right? In my case, I have never eaten a locust. I have seen it, but I have never eaten it. Right? Tried. This one was maybe also very simple. I asked, have you ever tried? I asked, have you ever tried the TOEIC test? Of course, that's the English test that's often used in business. Okay. The last one I asked, maybe you could understand this one. I asked, have you ever experienced a powerful earthquake? Right? Have you ever experienced a powerful earthquake? Which means, of course, that jishi. Right? And of course, I'm sure that most people do remember the earthquake, the powerful earthquake, which occurred maybe about 10 years ago. So, right? If you understood all 5 of these questions, that's wonderful. Right? The main point of this, right, is just to ask about someone's experience. Right? Have you ever? Right? So, right, we will continue this in a 3rd series next time. But that's all for today. Right? See you next time.